Hello and welcome to 100 Yards of Football, Sports Talk Radio. I'm your producer, Jeremiah Long, and joining me as always on Monday to talk about some football is the man himself, the man who brings us all of our great legendary stats and statistics. He makes our legendary slide decks, he brings you legendary interviews, and one day he'll be a legend himself, Mr. Logan Landers. How's it going, Mr. Landers?
Man, I'm telling you, Jeremiah, these last 2 weeks you've been on point with your introductions for me, man. I love I love it, but man, I'm doing great. It's a marvelous Monday. I'll go with that. I'm doing good. Ready to talk some football.
Absolutely. So last week we did have some ups and downs as we would with the season, where we had quite a few games that were canceled. We're hoping that everybody can hold it together for this game, so this game doesn't get canceled as well. Well, this is a big one though. We've got Clemson versus Florida State, and is it Clemson at Florida State? Are they traveling for this one?
Let's see. Yes, they're going to Florida State.
Man, okay. So if you're Florida State, you're thinking, we're getting the big dog down here on our home turf. We've got to really show out if we're going to come out of this respectable. The chance of getting the win, of course, isn't really high on people's minds, but there's always the chance. It's college football. That's my favorite thing about college football. Something incredible could always happen. Is it likely in this game? We're going to say it's not the most likely thing. But when Clemson comes down to Florida State, it's going to be huge, and Clemson has got to close out this season, as well as they can, after getting upset by Notre Dame. And so they've got to close out this season, and Florida State is looking to have some sort of, something to be talking about for the end of this season. So they'd love to at least bring it to the house when they can. So, Mr. Landers, get a little more in depth and tell us a little bit more about Clemson versus Florida State.
Well, like you said, Jeremiah, this is going to be a tough battle for Florida State. I mean, they're facing one of the best teams in the country. Yes, they were the number one seed for the longest time being, and they got knocked off by Notre Dame in that great game, that double overtime game, in which they lost 47-40. But you got to remember, they didn't have their star quarterback, who's going to be the number one overall draft pick, in Trevor Lawrence for that game because of a COVID-related illness. Yeah. So now that he's coming back against Florida State, he's not going to be the happiest man in the world to see his team having that one loss. He's ready to get back on the field, avenge that loss. And, man, if you're Florida State and you're that defense, I'm feeling it's going to be a long day on Saturday, I think, if it's anyone on that side. Yeah. I just think that's solely based off the fact that Trevor Lawrence is coming back off of, I think it's like 2 or 3 weeks now that he hasn't played. So he's whatever nagging kind of injuries or sorenesses he had, if he had any of the COVID-related illness, he's coming back down. He's 100%. And that's scary because this guy is for sure the number one overall draft pick, in my opinion, as well as a lot of people's opinions within the industry. And I mean, how can you blame him? This guy's been wildly successful his entire career at Clemson. And he's only been improving on his legacy in college, and you can only assume it's going to translate into the NFL. We'll have to see when he gets drafted, and he could even come back. Let's not forget, because everyone has that extra year of eligibility to come back because of the season. But I don't think he's coming back to college. I know there's people out there saying, "Man, if the Jets get the number one overall pick, I don't see Trevor going to them just because the Jets aren't the best team in the world at the moment." But look, that's always how it's going to be. The worst team in the NFL is going to draft the best player in college, and that's what I think is going to happen with Trevor. But let's get back to the game, though. So talking a little bit about Clemson and what I like about them on both sides of the ball. So like I said, offensively, you got Trevor Lawrence, the star quarterback. He's thrown for 1,833 yards on the season so far, and he's only going to improve on that on Saturday, I believe. But the thing that sticks out in my mind that's so impressive is his completion percentage. He's at 70% on the season so far.
Yeah,
135 out of 191, and you can't do too much better than that as a QB. That's very impressive. He's got 17 touchdowns in the year with 2 interceptions, so he's got that very good number in terms of that interception to touchdown ratio. You love to see that, and with a guy as talented as him, it doesn't shock me at all. He's doing this good. He's been consistent his entire career at Clemson, and it's only continuing this year. But let's talk a little about the rushing game, which I think is wildly underrated. If you look at Clemson, you always just look at Trevor and you don't think about anyone else on the team. But let's talk about Travis Etienne. This guy has been a star his entire career at Clemson. I mean, on the season so far, he's already ran for 634 yards. And a few weeks ago, he he passed the all-time ACC rushing record in his career.
Wow.
So for a guy who's the second best player on your team, he's no slouch himself.
Right.
If you're breaking records by an entire conference record and stuff like that, and you're known as the second best player on your team,
Right.
that's a good thing to have if you're the Clemson fans. But no, Etienne's been very solid this year. 10 touchdowns also, which is very impressive for a running back, considering we see more and more, teams are just throwing the ball more. So to see 10 touchdowns already, when they're 8 games into the season, going into 9, that's pretty good. I like that kind of. They have a really good mesh of running the ball and throwing the ball. Of course, you're going to be able to throw the ball more with your star quarterback, but they have a good blend, which I like to see from them. They're a fun team to watch. But on their receiving end, I really like Amari Rodgers. He's got 720 receiving yards this year, which is very impressive. 46 catches as well, which leads the team. And, man, this guy is a great wide receiver. 6 touchdowns on the year as well. So he's holding up his end of the bargain for Clemson on the offensive side of the ball. And he's out of Knoxville too, Jeremiah. So I know you got a little bit of love for him. Yes, sir. He's out of Knoxville. So I know you got a little bit of love for him. We always like to show our guys from Tennessee a little bit of love out there. Is a majority of our team's based out of Tennessee, and we're, as y'all know, we're filming out of Atlanta too. So any of those guys, we like to see them doing good. Like to see them, having a successful career and whatnot. So good, happy for them, and hopefully he can have another good game on a Saturday. So talking about the defensive side of the ball, we got to talk about defense because defense is almost as important, if not more than offense. So some guys that I like on the defensive side of the ball, I like. Let's see who we got here. I like Balen Spector, the linebacker. 23 solo tackles in the year, 46 in total, with 2.5 sacks on the year. This guy's been a very solid linebacker, and I love watching him play. But the thing I noticed about the Clemson defense is that I'm looking at the sacks leaders here. And there's only, there's 2 guys that have above 3. That's Brian Brees and Miles Murphy, who have 3 and 3.5 respectively. But they like to share who gets to the quarterback, because I'm looking here. 2.5 sacks, 2.5 sacks, 2.5, 2. So they don't, they're not greedy. They like to share in the fun there. They like to get to the quarterback, and they do, because they have a very solid defense as well. I know they didn't do the best against Notre Dame, but that's just defenses in general this year. We've seen, we've been saying for weeks and weeks now, will the defense improve in college and the NFL as well? And it kind of is, but we're not going to see, staggering defensive showdowns, I don't think, in the near future. But if you like offense, hey, all the power to you. And this game's going to have a lot of offense. But overall, I do like this Clemson team. They are very solid. I mean, God, we've seen how impressive they were, the number 1 team in the country. They just had that one loss, and that's the only thing that knocked them off. They're still in the playoff hunt. They are the number 4 seed, but they do have a chip on their shoulder now to get that win back. Yeah. So I do like Clemson in this game, but let's not discredit Florida State. Let's talk about them real quick. So we did a preview of the Florida State and NC State game last week, and Florida State was not able to get the win in that one. They lost 38-22. Florida State is now 2-6 on the year, and it's just a down year for them. I mean, let's just be honest with them. They're not having the best season. And what can you say? It is kind of weird, though, because we've seen just how dominant Florida State's been in college football. In the last couple of years, they've been very impressive. It's just that they've fallen off the wayside. They haven't got some of the best recruits and whatnot. They just haven't been able to perform as well as they have in the past. But, this is just a down year for them, and hopefully they can get it turned around sooner rather than later. But even though you're not having the best year and you're not going to win any conferences, you're not going to get to the playoffs or anything like that, that doesn't mean you can't play spoiler.
That's right. By that,
they can always come out. You can always come out and play a tough game. It don't matter if you're 7-0 or if you're 0-7. It don't matter. You can always come out and play hard and try and get that upset win. I mean, we've seen it. We've seen it time and time again where guys come in underestimating their opponent, and they get a loss that's devastating to their chances to getting to a national championship. And Florida State might be able to do that. I mean, they've been on a 3-game losing streak. And we talked about the other week, Jeremiah, that their defense has just not been there this year. They've given up 40 points in almost every single game this season. The only 2 games they haven't is against Georgia Tech, which was opening week. They gave up 16 points. And then this past week, they gave up 38. And they lost that one. So their big highlight win on the year is a win against North Carolina a couple weeks ago. They won 31-28, and that's their highlight so far, but they could maybe overshadow it with this. They could, knock off a team that, let's face it, they're still one of the favorites to win the national championship this year. And they have a few pieces to where if they play a solid game, if they play a perfect game, and if they don't make that many turnovers, it could possibly happen. So let's talk about this here. I like Florida State because I like Chuba Purdy. Now, he wasn't their starter going into the season. Like we said, their starter, Jordan Travis, went down with a knee injury, I believe. So that was a big blow for them because he was their starter. I'm looking at the stats here. He's still leading the team, obviously, in stats. 864 passing yards, 469 on the ground. So you took away just 1,000 yards right there, both on the ground and in the air with your quarterback, and you got to replace it somehow. But with Chuba, I've liked his style of play so far. He's been pretty decent coming off the bench. But I mean, like we've seen, if you're usually coming off the bench and you're not supposed to be, you're not the projected quarterback. Sometimes people come off with a slow start, and that's just the way it is with him so far. He's only thrown 219 yards on the year with a 50% completion percentage, which isn't the best, but he's thrown 2 touchdowns as well. So he's just kind of getting his feet wet, I think. He's still got a little bit of time to grow and really kind of develop with this offense because, let's face it, they still got a lot of time to go. People are going to say he's going to be the quarterback of the future for this Seminole team, and I think so as well. So we'll have to see. I do like their style of play, though. But some of the other guys I like on that team, LaDamian Webb, their running back as well, 69 attempts on the year with 369 yards, 3 touchdowns as well. So they have some pieces there. They're not, dead in the water, like you like to say. They're not there. Yeah. They do have some pieces that can, have a good game. I also like their receiving core as well. They like to share the ball as well, and they're receiving also. Tamari and Terry, Ontario Wilson, 2 guys who are very good. Wilson's got 332 receiving yards on the year, and Terry's got close to 300. So they're almost there. They're about to crack that plateau. But if they really want to get this game, they got to improve that defense. That's the first thing foremost. We've seen that, like I said earlier, that defense has been not the best in college this year, and they gotta show out this game. They have to prove that, like, okay, yeah, look, we've given up 30 high scoring games the whole season basically, but if they come out and then they show that, they can hang with Florida State just in the slightest, if they can limit them to under, let's just go with 30 points, I get that a win for them. A moral victory, which is always pretty solid. So some of the guys I think they need to kind of step up on defense and that can really kind of potentially get an upset in this game. I do like Amari Gardner, who is their linebacker. I also like Janarius Robinson as well, leading the team in sacks with 3. He's their defensive end. But Amari Gaynor, the linebacker, let me talk about him for a second. 60 tackles in the season. And then also right behind him is Emmett Rice with 55. Those 2 are leading the pack in terms of tackles, both linebackers, of course, so they're going to be getting more tackles than mostly anyone else. But I have liked their style of play so far. They've been very solid as well. But another key piece that could cause some issues for Trevor Lawrence is Asante Samuel Jr., who's got 3 interceptions on the year, the DB, and he's also got 30 tackles on the year as well. So if those guys can step up for that Florida State Seminole defense, they could make Trevor Lawrence's day a little bit more nervous. They could get him, sweating a little bit. But overall about this game, I do think Clemson will get the win in this one. But if you're Florida State, I think a good moral victory, if you're not going to get the win in this one, I would say limit them to under 30 points, and I'd be happy with that if I was a coach.
Yeah. And, I mean, that's all you can really hope for at this point. I mean, Clemson's got Virginia next week on 11/28, and then they've got Duke on December the 5th. So this is probably their only real challenge. I mean, do they have a challenge left? They've just got to keep playing football all the way to the end at this point, and they could probably close out this season. When it comes to the Clemson side, after they face when it comes to the Florida State side, after they face Clemson this Saturday on the 21st, their next opponent is Pittsburgh on the 28th, and then on December the 5th, they'll be facing well, I'm not sure exactly.
Virginia Tech.
Virginia Tech, right? Yeah. So you've got Pittsburgh, you've got Virginia Tech in the next 2 weeks. and they're gonna close their season out. I would think Florida State can close their season out if after this. But so they can get 2 more wins after this. I feel like.
Yeah.
So they both have a great chance to finish out their season strong. But it just depends, where things go from here. Of course, with Clemson, I think that they're going to get the W. It might be a convincing win given the status of how things are going. And if they can do that, then they'll make it to the playoffs, and they can show their worth once they get through the playoffs. With Florida State, do you think that assuming that we have bowl games, do you think that they will be in contention for a bowl game?
I don't think so, Jeremiah. I don't think they're going to be able to get to a bowl game this season. I mean, their record's not the best at the moment. Like I said, they're 2-6 on the year, and it looks like they're about to be 2-7 after Clemson. So it's not looking like a bowl year for them. Unfortunately, like I said, it's always kind of strange to see one of the powerhouses in football kind of have an off year. I mean, we've seen that time and time again. I mean, look, Alabama wasn't the best team 15, 20 years ago. They weren't thought of as one of the most dominant teams. But now look at them now. They're always winning. They're always in contention to be the number 1 team. And I mean, Florida State's been a very, very good program since, in the history of college football. They're one of the most respected teams. Yeah. And our guy, Bobby Butler, played for them as well. And he was able to get them a couple of wins as well. So, like I said, one of the best teams in college football. And they just have had a bad year. I mean, what else can I say? They just haven't had a good year. But hopefully things are going to be on the upside. If they can have, like I said, if they can get a good game against Clemson, hold them to under 30 points. And if they can get, I do think they can get those 2 wins against Virginia and Duke. I think they can pull those out. If not, I think they can at least beat Duke and at least get 3 wins on the year. And just, hopefully they can get that last win of the season and just go into the offseason with a win.
Definitely. Well, for everybody watching, we are 100 Yards of Football, Sports Talk Radio. We bring you game previews, interviews with legendary players and coaches. We bring on and do interviews with some of the greatest sportscasters around the country. We also do player prospects, and we'll be getting into the draft previews not too long from now. You can watch us live every single week on Facebook, Twitch, YouTube, and you go over and watch listen to us on our podcast on Apple, on Spotify, on Stitcher, or wherever that you listen to podcasts. So for the whole team here at 100 Yards of Football, I'm Jeremiah Long, and I've been joined by the man himself, our co-host with the most, the man who brings us all of our stats and figures and is becoming a true staple in the sportscasting world, Mr. Logan Landers. So last thing I would say is thank you guys so much for watching the shows, and thank you so much for all your support so far. If there's anything that you'd like to see on the show, whether it's a different player profile, whether it's a certain game preview, whether there's a certain team that we're not giving enough love to, or some players from history that you'd love to hear more about, then just hit us up. Either drop us a comment, send us a message, go to our website, or hit us up any way that you can through social media. So for the whole team here, I'm Jeremiah, and this has been Logan Landers, and we'll see you guys a little later in the week. Bye now.